Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I want to show y'all how to make your own faux labradorite cabochons. So this isn't really catching it, so let's get the camera flipped around so you can get a better look. So I have a bunch of scrap clay mushed together and conditioned out to the thickest setting on my pasta machine. There will be links to all the different tools and materials I'm using here down in the video description below. And I want to start by showing you guys some different examples of labradorite. If I don't have a tangible specimen on hand, tangible, it's a rock, of course, but if I don't have one like on hand that I can like touch and look at and like turn and get a good idea of, I'll do a pretty thorough image search for whatever stone I'm trying to recreate, just to try to get a full idea of the spectrum that the stones, and it kind of average it out in my mind of how does this stone on average look. Because sometimes you'll get pieces like this and it's just like exceptional, and sometimes you'll get pieces like the top part of this one where it's just kind of splotted out and it's not really, boom, labradorite. And so I wanted to kind of find a middle ground, or just a part that I'm like, oh gosh, that's my favorite. I want it to be like that. Not necessarily, I mean, I do really like that, but to just see if I do have a favorite that I want to try to emulate, or get the creative juices flowing. So on this example here, you can really see all in the same stone we're getting a lot of bluey green flashes and these orange and like almost salmon pinks, like burnt oranges, and then we have some really fine feathery lines this way, some crosswise lines a little farther apart right here, and then much larger scraggly crack like lines. So, and again, on the same stone, we can have very bold splotches, or we can have just like little bits of stuff going on. And then we also, here I have a sphere of labradorite. Randy and I really like rocks, so and labradorite is a favorite of both of ours, so that's why we have kind of so much of it. But here you can see just these nice little inclusions even. Now, I'm no geologist, so I'm not entirely certain what this is, but labradorite is a feldspar, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but so I don't know if this would be calcite or what in with it, but I love this sphere because, I mean, almost from every direction. Sorry for the little clippity-cloppity dog nails on the hard floor. But it's just, oh, so pretty though, you guys. Like, I love this stone. But natural inclusions, I mean, these things happen, and I honestly really love it. And again, just this marbling of these different, so that one's really pretty. And something also, whenever you look at the stone, it can look quite opaque, but I'm going to come through with a flashlight and you can see it's actually a bit translucent. But that's really, really neat to me, that we can get that effect. And this one isn't exactly, I mean, it's almost a centimeter thick right there, and the light's still coming through. So cool. Now here I have some cabochon beads. And you can see a lot of the larger specimens that I have are this nice dark feldspar, whereas these ones are a much lighter gray. And labradorite's actually in the same family, I don't know if that's the term to use, but as like aventurine and rainbow moonstone and stuff. So possibly sunstone, maybe? I'm not certain. I don't know, I was reading up about it in one of my favorite gem books earlier. Gemstones of the World. And yeah, Amazonite, that's what it was, not green, not aventurine. Okay. Moonstone, orthoclase, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce like any of these words, and aventurine. But yeah, it's, rocks are cool, y'all. And we are going to focus now on making our own out of polymer clay. So here you can see some different examples of what I've made with the clay, just trying to achieve similar modeling and flashes and stuff, and I get varying degrees of success. And now there are some other really good Labradorite tutorials here on YouTube, but I just wanted to show you guys my version of how I like going about it. I really like this little one, you know, kind of just catching the flashes and stuff. I really do like the ones that have a little bit more dark in them as well. But in these I have domed, I'm using Primo Sculpey. You could also just as easily use Kato or Fimo. I'm finding myself steering farther and farther away from just using Sculpey 3 because it just crumbles too much. Like, it's a little too brittle after baking. But I really enjoy the Primo Sculpey, and I've domed them with Art and Glow. It says it resists yellowing, but anytime that you use resin to dome your work, I wouldn't recommend it for anything that's going to be outside or under direct UV exposure because it will cause it to yellow over time. That just happens. But so here are some different examples, and they're really hard to catch on camera even, but just those colors. So I'm going to keep these off to the side so that you can look at them as we work. Now, you can use just black. Here I have black with acrylic paints that, like, it was the scrap clay actually from previous, you know, from like these batches, just re-rolled back together. You can also get really interesting effects by using like the silver Primo effects, like their metallic colors, as well as, you know, just experiment with using maybe a blue or a green, or even like a very dark brown or like a camouflage green with brown modeled through it as the base color. You can get really infinite variations of this. The paints that I'm using are Folk Art Color Shift in Green Flash and Blue Flash. Now again, I'm just giving you this information for if you want to replicate what I'm doing exactly, but there are a bunch of different colors that you could, you know, experiment with. And I do recommend these paints, the Folk Art and the Lumiere, because the colors stay true after baking. It's heartbreaking to put all the work into something and then just have it discolor whenever it's in the oven. Lumiere in pewter, pearlescent turquoise, and pearlescent emerald. And then these are the real game changers for me. The Halo, blue gold, violet gold, and pink gold. I really love these ones, like, so much. And then the tools that I'm using are just an awl and a wire brush, which if you don't have a wire brush, you could just use like the awl a whole bunch, or you could bind together some scrap wire if you're a wire wrapper, just whatever you have on hand. But honestly, these are quite affordable and they're worth the weight in, well, it's not very heavy. It's worth it. I was gonna say it's worth its weight in gold, but never mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just dragging this in one direction across my clay. You can see very lightly. And then we can also drag much more deeply in another direction. Just kind of getting a little bit, you can just throw in some slashes and splashes. And then we can also, I'm just going to come through and radiating from one central point. That way it's not like checkerboarding out across our clay. Then I'm going to do that same thing from over here. And I'm not really worrying about if my lines are close together or far apart or perfectly straight or have a little bit of a curve. I'm just not worried about it. And then I'm going to do a couple more. Just kind of messing about. There's really, worst case scenario, it's just gonna come out very pretty. You know, and so you'll be able to experiment and see what you like best. Now also sometimes with the scrap clay, it will just peel right off. The other tutorials that I've watched for replicating gemstones involve quite a bit of sanding. I don't really like sanding. I don't know, it never gets shiny enough for me. I like doming with resin. So with any of the paints and stuff. You could dome this with a translucent clay, like a very thin layer of translucent clay, but that'll be a tutorial for another day. So again, just keep in mind, I don't recommend sanding this. And so what I'm going to do now is, I guess I'm going to start with the green flash. I do it a little bit different every time. Ooh. And I just use the lid as a palette, but I'm going to get a little bit of water on my brush, a little bit of paint on my brush, and just start splotching it in. Rinse my brush and get the next color. And shake it to make sure that the color is distributed well. Now I really like this one because it has like a purple flash in it. And I mean, really globbing it on there a bit. Trying to be irregular, but we'll get there. And now shaking, and I like these little droppers too because it's a little faster sometimes. Just doing a couple of drops randomly. That was the pearlescent emerald. Now on to the pearlescent turquoise. And you may want to experiment. I'm putting quite a bit of paint on here, but you may want to experiment with using very little paint and seeing what kind of effects those get you. And I use similar techniques for the Lumiere paints in a lot of my tutorials, but this one was a little bit more specifically just labradorite. And it's been mentioned that I could use, well, why don't you just use, eyeshadow or Pearlex pigments. A lot of eyeshadows are not color fast, so they start to break down over time, which is a thing, that's all right, but it's, and so I'm coming in with a wet brush and just starting to kind of spread and splotch these colors in together. But also on this, I'm going to show you with the paint, since it's suspended, liquid, we're going to start getting some really interesting effects whenever I come through with the spritz bottle, especially with these halo paints. Again, rinsing my brush quite thoroughly, getting some paint on there. Now with this one, I'm going to try really hard to not mix it in, because the orangey red, the orangey pink in with the greens just makes like a mud color. So if you just leave it in kind of sitting on top, then we'll be a lot more likely, like you'll see like already it's starting to separate out a little bit. Okay, so there's that. And now I haven't actually gotten to the halo violet and halo gold, or blue, sorry. We can fit them in, I do believe. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a spritz bottle I left on the other side of the room. And this is just a regular, dollar store spray bottle. And I'm just going to come in and spray it a bit. And now, again with a wet brush, just adding in some of the purple halo. And then I'm going to add in some of this halo blue gold. Yeah. And so now from here, I'm going to spray some more. And I like to get in kind of close because that blows the paint off of that area. And we're going to start getting some cool effects here. Now, also, I am going to let the paint run off. My table leans that way a bit, so... And there's a little bit more clustering right there than what I wanted. Like the paint didn't quite break up all the way. Okay, so you can see it's starting to slide off in this direction. I'm just going to wick it up. Eep. And the damn floodgates have broken or opened. And so I'm actually going to zoom in on this and throw it into some fast forward for you guys. So it has been about 2 hours. We are completely dry. Well, except for that little bit right there, but that's all right. I'm just smushing it with my finger. And this is how it has come out. Which normally I prefer to only use like 3 colors. That's how I got, you know, these examples. But I thought it would be really neat to just try something different with y'all just to see what happens. And I'm really pleased with this area right down here, as well as kind of right in through here. So what I'm going to do is take, I really like the teardrop shape for personally in my own jewelry. Like I find it really easy and fun to wrap and very flattering on a lot of different, you know, necklines and styles and stuff. And so I'm just going to position our cutter and then press. Blend out the little area that the cutter leaves. Now, and you could go ahead and, you know, layer this on top of another piece of clay and pass it, or not pass it through the pasta machine, but kind of just roll over it a little bit and then like lay down a sheet of plastic, like doubled up plastic wrap or a sandwich bag, and then press to give yourself a nice domed effect, and then use like maybe you know, a really thick UV resin and then cure it. That way you have a little bit more of a domed shape, but I really like this effect. So that's what I'll be doing here. But again, you can take these techniques and do whatever you like with them. And I'm just placing this over on a stone tile. And I will be baking this at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. I really bake the heck out of them, just because I figure why not. If it were a lighter colored clay, I'd be a little bit more concerned about like making sure that it doesn't burn or something. But with the black clay, I don't really have to worry about it, and it makes for a really strong, durable clay. I really like that one. And again, some of these aren't really looking as much like labradorite as I would have liked. That's the, you know, what you get for experimenting, I guess. But the ones that didn't really come out, I think, still look pretty. That could be worse. And you could feel free to use different sizes of cutters. Like, I'm going to use a slightly smaller cutter on this one. Maybe a slightly smaller oval. Again, blending out that seam. And so that one has a nice, almost spectralite effect to it because it's got some purple in it as well. And so I'm just going to go through and cut cabs out of all of this sheet of clay and bake it, and I'll meet you guys back here for the next step. The cabochons have come out of the oven and cooled, and so now I'm going through and using this UV resin. On the other cabs I used Art and Glow, and I really like that, but it takes like 24 hours to dry, so I wanted to use the UV resin for those of us who aren't patient. And I'm just coming through, and I have like a UV light, and being careful to not get any bubbles in it. Like, I don't shake it, and I don't like submerge the tip and blow like milk bubbles in it, kind of, with the bottle, if that makes sense. And I'm just coming around, filling it in, being careful to not come too close to the edges. You don't have to put a ton on there. You can always come back through and do a second layer. So there's that, and then I'm going to come through with my little needle awl tool and just kind of scrape it to the edge. So you can kind of see how this is working, hopefully. Maybe we can zoom in a bit. But yeah, but getting that surface tension, I don't want to break it and have it like break the surface tension and have it start oozing over the sides, but I do want to bring that surface tension all the way over to the sides. And if there's any bubbles in it, you can kind of stir them around a bit. And then also, here I have just a regular big lighter, and we can, and you don't want to bake it, but that'll help pop any little air bubbles that are in there. So there we are. And now zooming out and coming down, lining the tray up so that the front's on the front. I'm just going to take this and slide it right in, and setting the timer. And then I'm going to go ahead and let that cure. And the timer goes for 2 minutes. Sometimes I'll put it through twice just to be absolutely certain, but usually it only takes one. There's a bit of a smell coming off of it. If I'm not recording, I usually use a respirator, but I am in a well-ventilated room. Also, this UV resin does set up pretty nicely, just under direct sunlight as well, though I usually leave it out for about half an hour just to be good and certain. Alrighty, so this is how some of them have come out. Oof, I really wish the camera were a wee bit better, but you got a pretty good look at it earlier. But this is it after the resin. Ooh, yeah, that flash though. Sorry, the fill light that I have is not the best for catching the flash. They really come to life in person though. Anybody who's purchased them off of my Etsy shop and left a review, y'all seemed pretty impressed with them. And then, speaking of which, segue into a shameless plug, I do sell these on my Etsy store, though availability is limited sometimes. And I also send them out in my monthly craft crates to all of my generous patrons. So now I don't just do the Labradorite ones, I do all sorts of different handmade cabochons, but they're a lot of fun to use in jewelry. I don't recommend them for any projects where you would be baking them. The resins, don't bake the resin. So if you wanted to make a polymer clay bezel for this, I would go ahead and like make the bezel and then remove the cab and then bake the bezel and then come back and then glue it in with like some super glue or something. And that way you can make the polymer clay bezel, but you're not going to be heating or distorting the resin. And I think I'd mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, I wouldn't use this for any outdoor decor or something that's going to be sitting on a windowsill, because that will accelerate the yellowing of the resin. But an option that you do have would be to make these shapes of the clay out like in the same shape as maybe a glass dome like cabochon or something, and that way you can get the cool colors and effects and stuff of the polymer clay, but also that very nice doming and magnification and durability of the glass cabs. So there's so many different options here, and I'm really excited to hear from y'all about any ideas that you have. So please feel free to leave a comment down below, and also to tag me on Instagram or share things to my Facebook wall if you follow along with any of my tutorials. And ooh, this one was super pretty. I really liked that one. If you follow along with any of my tutorials and or just want to show me some stuff, like tag me, it lets me know, and that way I can see it and I can be like, oh, that's cool, because y'all are the most crafty and creative bunch of people I have ever had the joy of meeting, or kind of meeting, like internet meeting. Sorry, it's really late at the time of recording and I ought to have gone to bed like an hour ago. But I was waiting for the clay to bake. So any questions, comments, or ideas? I think I already said that. Check me out on Patreon. We do stuff for free over on Patreon. You don't even have to be a pledger, though the more you pledge, the more you get, whether it's behind the scenes content or like the craft crates or the digital downloads. I'm going to bed, you guys. I will see y'all in my next video. Have a fantastic day and happy crafting. Bye. Oh, that was a loud one.